The Museum of Islamic Art was meant to open in 2006. There was a situation that needed to be addressed. He said, "You have so much energy, go and deal with this problem." I was 23, I think.
Wow.
And I wanted to be a foreign diplomat, but I immediately realized the similarity in working in arts and culture to foreign policy. My grandmother is an amazing chef. Some people say she's over 100, but she says she's 94.
She's lying about her age.
I always say if she had a restaurant, she'd get 3 Michelin stars because, we always say when you cook with your heart, the meal comes out differently.
Ask a contemporary architect or an artist who has most influenced the culture and global identity of the Middle East, and the answer will be the woman sitting next to me, Her Excellency Sheikha Mayassa bint Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani. Ask me, a chef, what she has also influenced, and I will answer it as how she has mentored and acknowledged the food of her country. Over 20 years as head of Qatar Museums, she has transformed the nation's artistic landscape, mentoring local creatives, building contemporary museums, and investing in bold public art projects that push the boundaries with deep conviction. IMP's Museum of Islamic Art, Jean Nouvel's National Museum of Qatar in the form of Desert Rose, Richard Serra's East-West, West-East, and more. Tell me about growing up.
I was born in Geneva.
In Geneva?
Yes, many people don't know that.
I didn't know that.
But I grew up in Doha, in Qatar. I did all my schooling there, actually.
And do you remember early days of food? What you ate?
Yes, always. Because, food, it still remains pretty much part of our culture today. We eat as a family. All of our meals we eat together, which is really nice. So food is the thing that brings everybody together. And it's always the case in a Qatari household. There's more food for everyone because people can turn up at any time with their family, friends, and join the meal, whether it's lunch, whether it's afternoon tea, whether it's dinner, whether it's a late night meal. So, we had a very simple life growing up because Qatar was a very different country to what it is today. There's a lot more development that's happened since we were children.
Who cooked?
We had chefs.
Yeah,
my mother didn't love to cook, but sometimes we cooked as a family. Like in the desert, for example, we would camp. My father loved to camp in the desert. And in the winter season, we would stay for months in the desert, living in tents and caravans.
You did not go to school?
We would go to school, but we'd have to leave at 5 in the morning because school starts at 7 in Qatar. So we'd leave at 5 in the morning, sometimes even going to a camel race before going to school. It was very much, something that was ingrained. We'd ride camels.
Is that because of the heat, or what is it that it starts so early in the morning?
I think it's more to do with the family time. My children come home and have lunch with us every day.
In Italy, it's very much like that. When Richard was working with Renzo Piano, they came home for lunch every day.
Yeah.
Part of the culture that you had lunch at home.
Well, in Paris, they gave you the option to take your children home for lunch, but if you didn't leave close enough to the school, it would not make logistic sense to do so.
Yeah.
But I think
in Qatar,
it's very much ingrained that you have meals together as a family, which I think is very important.
It is, yeah. What would breakfast be like?
So usually the traditional Qatari dishes for breakfast are balalit, which is it's like a sweet rice, like
the sweet rice,
with omelette or egg on top. Or you have egg and shakshuka, which is egg and tomatoes. Or sometimes, you can add vegetables or meat if you wanted. There's also beans, a lot of beans and bread. Haris is another very typical. My children love haris. They will eat it at any opportunity, which is a wheat grain that they leave to simmer overnight so that it gets very, very soft and with meat. And then you mash the meat and the grain with a big wooden stick until it becomes almost like a porridge, but it has more texture and it's delicious.
And we're still on breakfast. This is breakfast.
So this meal you can have, usually it's a very traditional meal during Ramadan where we're fasting. And it's one of the first things people will eat, the haris. Dates is actually typically how you break your fast, dates and water or dates and leban. It depends, or Arabic coffee. It's always date and something. And then haris would be, one of the staple dishes. And children have it for breakfast.
So meal times were important.
Very much so.
And everybody was there. So
yes.
How many in your family were there?
I'm one of 7. I have 5 brothers and a sister. And so we ate together, but our family means also the extension of the family. So there's cousins, there's aunts, there's uncles, there's relatives, there's friends, there's colleagues. My father would always come home with his colleagues to have lunch or dinner at the house. But when we lived in the desert, we also did a lot of outdoor cooking. You know, there's cultural traditions of cooking within the sand. So you dig a hole, you'd cook the, let's say, the goat or the sheep in the sand. You do different forms of barbecue. And we used a lot of spices, and we'd use, the fire, outdoor fire, like a real fire, and you'd have the big pots, the tin pots, and you'd cook traditional dishes like majboos.
What's that?
Which is it's a rice dish, a rice meal. Mainly it's rice with turmeric and lots of spices such as cardamom or bay leaves, saffron, lots of saffron and turmeric.
Sounds
and then
so good. I'm getting
you
starving.
You have to come and eat.
It's the kind of food we like.
It smells so good when you cook it, and then you can add meat or chicken or fish. Some people now also use seafood.
So did you grow up really being that interested in food, particularly more
Me,
than
I love food. I mean, I love trying restaurants, and every time I travel, I really try to try new restaurants or new chefs, let's say. But also in my profession, we look at food as a form of culture. Form of art, I should say. I remember when we were planning to open the National Museum. I get all of these brand restaurants that wanted to open their brand in the restaurant, and I said we don't want to do that because people have to experience the pleasure of food. Food gathers people, it creates a lot of emotion, it brings and invites a lot of interesting conversations. So for the National Museum and the Islamic Art Museum, we collaborated with Alain Ducasse to create our own menu for the two museums and our own brand of a restaurant. And I think we actually really inspired Alain, because in some of his restaurants in Paris, you'll see dishes that we created together in his menu. So like the restaurant at the Museum of Islamic Art is our first gastronomy restaurant in Qatar. We received a Michelin star last year. And it's basically a reflection of our collections. It's cuisine of the Islamic civilization expanding from Spain to China. And every time we have a culture year program, we try to include dishes from that country if relevant. So 2 years ago, we celebrated Indonesia, and it was for me, a discovery. Their food is amazing, because I haven't been to Indonesia. And we brought in chefs from Indonesia, and we did chefs in residency with them, and the food was amazing.
What was it like?
It was, it's very much Asiatic food, but the combination, the presentation, Indonesia, I think, is one of the only countries that has a minister for the creative economy. So they've invested a lot in developing, their talent and the different disciplines that fall under the creative economy, food being one of them. So I mean, I can't even describe it. It's a whole experience. Like when I think about the food we ate during the dinners that we hosted with the chefs from Indonesia, it gives me a lot of satisfaction. Whenever we travel, and with my father especially, the first thing he does in the morning is take us to the market. He'll take us to the fish market, he'll take us to the vegetable market, and he loves to take his grandchildren to teach them about the sort, where does food come from, and to learn about, the different produce in the different countries that they're visiting. And I think you can't really understand a country and a culture if you don't understand the food.
Tell me about your father.
My father is to me, he's a visionary man. He basically is known as the modern founder of Qatar. He established something called the Qatar National Vision 2030, which basically was the framework of all the reforms that we developed in Qatar. So, I was placed in my position because he had a plan for culture, and he felt that I could help him develop that plan. And now my brother, who's the Emir of Qatar, has continued to implement the vision of Qatar, which we call the National Vision 2030, which I hope you'll come see and experience for yourself.
Yeah, we will. We will. So growing up in Qatar, but you went to Duke, to university in the United States.
Yes, don't ask me
What
how
was
I
that
ended up in the
like?
South.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't think I would end up in the US. I was the first child of my mother's children to go, and probably my father too, to go to the US to study. And so I just applied randomly, really,
Yeah.
but with the counselor from school, we went through a list and I applied. Like, I remember he told me apply to Tufts, and I didn't like the name Tufts, so I
Yeah,
said
it
no
does.
way, I'm not going to apply there. But that's, in hindsight, I would have probably been very happy.
What was that like, going from this incredibly enveloping culture of food and being at home to being at a university?
Duke had actually a very good system. All freshmen had to live on East Campus. They had a big food hall, and the big food hall, they had all sorts of cuisine. You had food from the South, you had international, you had Mediterranean, and there's a lot of restaurants around. You know, I remember there was an Afghani restaurant, 5-minute walk from my dorm. So me and my friends would go there a lot, and we would eat there. There was also an Indian restaurant. So there was a lot of cuisine that I was very familiar with, and I was also familiar with American cuisine. So it was, the food from the South, they did a lot of barbecues. And also the people in North Carolina are very, very generous. So you're constantly invited for meals and even Thanksgiving. So it was different from, Qatari food. But we had traveled a lot around the world, so I was familiar with a lot of the food that was there. So it was actually a very good experience, I would say, and also a difficult one. But you have to go through difficult experiences to appreciate what you had.
With the difficulties being homesick and kind of
away. It was interesting. It wasn't about being homesick because I was, used to, I was quite independent, very young. But it was more, I came from a very international environment, and when I arrived at Duke, I found it very segregated in a very strange way. So it was, it took time to adjust. But then it was and then the 9/11 happened, within 2 weeks of arrival. But actually, I have to say, the people on the campus were very, very generous and kind to myself and all the Muslims and Arabs. And there was quite a large community from the Arab world. It was a lot of people from the Arab world were actually were part of my freshman class. So it was very international. Duke was very international. And so it was very easy to make friends. Some of my closest friends today are from Duke University.
Yeah. Then you went to New York?
So after North Carolina, I actually did a junior year in Paris. It was the best thing I could have done.
Quite different. So you've done food in Qatar, food in North Carolina, and then food in Paris.
It was really the greatest experience because the systems in the French education were very different to the American one. The food for sure was very different, and it's very much richer. My favorite thing in Paris is the Saturday and Sunday markets in different arrondissements. I lived in the 7th recently, and I would go to the one in Boulevard Raspail, and I loved just going there.
It's a great market.
And I take my kids, and we pick up the ingredients. There's something special about going to the market, and learning from the people who are selling the produce.
Yeah. As we say, it tells you about the culture, but I always think that actually what you should do is not go to the market with a recipe in your head. You should go to the market and see what's there and then go home and cook.
You're a real chef.
No, but I think anybody could do that because I think that the worst thing is when you sort of drive around London looking for an ingredient, or search all over Paris trying to find anywhere. And then if you go and you see what's there, and then, then you can come back.
I think it's probably a better way to approach it. I would agree to that.
Yeah. Did you, when you were in Paris, so at Sciences Po, would you also eat out a lot? Would you go to all the different restaurants? You said that the food was heavy, but
so in Paris, I ate most of my meals, I would say, out. And in Paris, it's very easy. Some food was very rich, but you could go to the brasserie, any brasserie on the street, and you have a very, fresh salad or dish. So I if I remember correctly, I think I ate most of the time trying different restaurants and different cafes.
That's what
I barely had time to cook because I was trying to, visit all the museums and see, it was a completely different experience to Durham.
What year was that?
That was 2003 to 2004, my junior year. I graduated from Duke in 2005.
So was it hard to go back to Duke?
Very impossible.
After Paris,
it was impossible to go back. I don't know how I went back.
But you did.
But I did to finish, and I finished, and then I got engaged during that year. My husband said, we'll go back to Paris one day, and we spent 2 years in Paris, and and those were great years.
And then New York as well.
Yes, so after I got married and had my first child, I went to Colombia to do my master's. So I spent 2 years in New York with my husband, who also did his master's at Columbia. I love New York.
Yeah.
Like, I think that this is a city that makes you the most productive, because the energy there is unbelievable. Like, you never want to stop.
And
And
you don't get up at 5 in the morning.
Oh yeah, New York, I get up at 5.
Oh, do you?
Everybody gets up at 5 in New York. I'm not the only one. I feel I'm in good company.
Yeah, it does. It's a lot.
Yeah, everybody wakes up at 5.
Yeah.
You go to the gym. Yeah, it's the culture is very dynamic, and to live there when you're young, I think it teaches you a lot for discipline, resilience, because it's also a very competitive city.
Yeah.
But when I was at Columbia, Mayor Bloomberg was the mayor, and I worked with his culture commissioner at that time. And they were working on the expansion of the Lincoln Center. And I was already chairing the museum, so I basically applied all my work and internship and classes around the museums, and I learned a lot. It was like a crash course in culture, and I worked a lot actually with I.M. Pei and Richard Serra on the museum park and how we're going to expand the urban park of the museum to incorporate experiences like culinary experiences, which is quite central to our museum. It was the way to bring people into the museum by offering them amazing food experiences. So when you come to the museum, you can have an afternoon tea with scones and jam, and and it's like you don't just go to the museum to look at art. You go to the museum to experience a culture that includes food, art, parks, playgrounds.
And then you went back to Qatar to develop. How did that happen?
So, my father was, to me, a very inspiring person. When he shared his vision of what he was going to do, we all wanted to be part of that. We all wanted to participate. So when I finished Duke University, I immediately started working with my father, and then I was in his office, and there was a situation at the Museum of Islamic Art that needed to be addressed. So immediately he said, you have so much energy, go and deal with this problem. The Museum of Islamic Art was meant to open in 2006 for the Asian Games. It was part of the plan. And he wanted me to take over this project. And I wanted to be a foreign diplomat, and I wanted to be the first woman minister of foreign affairs of my country. But I immediately realized the similarity in working in arts and culture to foreign policy. So after a few months, I went to my father and said, this is such an important portfolio. I really need to dedicate all of my time to this museum and to plan the future museums that you want realized.
And you were how old?
It was in 2005, so I was 23, I think.
Wow.
And it was great. To me, I feel like I've spent half of my life in this department of developing culture, but it's been the greatest journey, and I feel very privileged and really grateful to my father and my brother for believing in the empowerment of human beings through arts and culture. Create spaces for dialogue and discussions on all sorts of things that I think other areas may make more difficult. Well, and always over a table and a good meal.
I like the idea of getting, of a museum not being a temple of art, but being a living, breathing place where you can take your kids, where you can have a meal, where you can look at one painting and then leave. Yeah. I mean, I know that with the Pompidou, that Renzo and Richard wanted people to come into a place and sort of have fun and see noise and have a coffee and then ride an escalator. They used to say they wanted people just to ride if you could get somebody to ride an escalator and just look at the views of Paris, they might just then wander into a museum or into the library.
Yeah.
The idea.
It's interesting you say that, because when I was a student in Paris, one of my favorite museums were Musée d'Orsay on the left bank and Centre Pompidou on the right, and I loved the escalator and the colors, and I would say to myself, whoever created this building was a genius, because it's still relevant today, and at that time it was quite controversial. Spent every Sunday there. It's it's a beautiful project, and I spend a lot of time at the cafe upstairs.
Yeah, the
George by Cost.
Yeah.
The food there is always good.
No, it's important. Food and culture and food. What are the challenges now in Qatar? You know, looking at your history.
Until recently, we ate all our meals at home, and so like when I go out in a restaurant, even whether I'm in London or Paris, wherever I am, if there's food left, I always ask them to pack it. We don't in Islam. You have to respect food. In fact, this is one of the things we teach all of our children. You know, we eat with gratitude. When before you start any meal, you say Bismillah, which is in the name of God. Then after you finish, you say Alhamdulillah, which is thank you God for this meal. Because we always remind ourselves, one day you have something, one day you don't. When my father was a child, he had no food. He would say they all shared one meal and they were all never satisfied because the country was poor. So just because today our country is rich and we have the abundance of food, doesn't mean we don't, respect it. So we have to respect food, and we try to reduce food waste. So for Qatar, every household cooks their local dishes, and from one woman to another, the dishes may vary in terms of the spices they like, or the protein they use. They may use chicken instead of fish, or eat a vegetarian version of that meal, and it's very much rooted. I don't think there's a loss. I mean, my kids, even though they lived in Europe and the US, we always made a point of cooking Qatari dishes, and I would cook for them most of the time because I like to do that. But also, most chefs that you find abroad don't know your Qatari recipes. So people are aware of their food, and we've made it very much central in our National Museum to have the Qatari dishes there. So the Jean Nouvel Desert Rose Museum has a restaurant called Jiwan, which is done by Alan Ducasse, but it's Qatari dishes, and it's family sharing, because in Qatar you don't have a plate with a plated first and second and third meal. You have dishes in the center of the table that you all share, and we still very much eat with our right hand. We teach our kids to eat with their hands, and it has to be only with their right hand. They can't eat with both hands.
Wow.
And if you have a lot of people and there's a small table, there is also a hierarchy you have to respect. The elders eat first, and when they're finished, the next age group goes until the youngest eats, which is I think it teaches them respect. It teaches them patience and discipline. So that's very much still rooted. When we go to the desert or we're camping, we eat on the floor and we all sit and we share a dish. And it's not so many dishes. Sometimes it's just 3 or 4 dishes, but they're all delicious and everything is gone. And so I think that is really important tradition of ours when it comes to the food, is to respect what we eat, but also not to waste food, and to know that it's a blessing that you have food and others may not have a meal.
I'm getting so hungry. I don't want to eat in the River Cafe. Can we go find a Qatari restaurant? So if I did want to have the food of Qatar in London, I'm asking you this as a rhetorical question because I think you are going to do a Qatari cafe. Is that right?
Yeah, so
in London?
we just opened the Chancery with Rosewood, and actually we are planning to open a version of the Desert Rose Cafe, which is by a Qatari chef. Her name is Nofel Merri. She's an amazing chef. When we opened the National Museum, as I mentioned, we had all these offers from people who wanted to open their restaurants, and I didn't want to open a franchise. I didn't think people would come to the museum to eat at a restaurant that existed elsewhere. We wanted to create our own cafe concept of ours that we own, that's proud of our Qatari cuisine and also informs and educates people of it. So the restaurant is very much typical Qatari food. So you can go there for breakfast, for lunch, and afternoon, and then for dinner you could go to the restaurant upstairs, which is a gastronomy restaurant, but it's very family sharing. So you go to share your meal with your friends or your family.
And is that what you'll do at the Rosewood?
So at the Rosewood, we're going to take similar to the cafe, Desert Rose Cafe, and it will have all the local dishes that you would find in Qatar. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And Chef Nov created a very interesting street food called rgag. Rgag is it's a thin bread, very typical. We use it in many of our dishes, and it's like and she puts like inside different recipes, and it's the most delicious grab and go sandwiches. So we're thinking also to have a food cart just outside, the terrace of the Rosewood, where you can grab that sandwich and go. And there's more and more Qataris choosing to become a chef as a profession. Whereas in the past, to become a chef was not
if you couldn't do anything else. I think that's international now.
But it's really interesting because it's true. Qatar, I always say it's like the most important commodity we have is a Qatar, because we're only like 400,000 people, and we want them to do everything. So to be a chef is like, I have so many other options. Why be a chef? You have to be really passionate to want to be a chef and to work the hours that you need to. So now we have more and more Qataris becoming chefs and really doing the research of their, local cuisine. And we're actually planning to open a culinary school, to teach Qatari food. I don't want to bring a culinary school to teach European food. I want to teach, because many people who come from different parts of the world are living in Qatar or visiting. They want to learn how to make a dish. And if I think the best way is to go to a place like a school where you can learn with other people, and it's fun, and it's next to the National Museum. So then you can learn and then experience it, or experience a meal and then come and learn the dish yourself. So it creates a wholesome experience of what culture does to your mood. We always say it improves the quality of your life. It improves the economy of your culture, and that's what we've been doing.
Well, food and culture, food and architecture, food and family, food and friendships. It's tied in together. But food is also comfort.
Absolutely.
And so what we usually do at the end of this wonderful conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been very happy to finally make it.
Finally did it. Is that when you want food for comfort, for your own comfort?
Yes.
Is there food that you remember or that means something to you that you would go to, my darling?
I love a cardamom in food. So there's a dish that my grandmother is an amazing chef. She's 94, I think. Some people say she's over 100, but she says she's 94.
She's lying about her age.
But she's I always say if she had a restaurant, she'd get 3 Michelin stars, because we always say when you cook with your heart, the meal comes out differently. And I spent many hours in the kitchen with her, helping her, observing her, learning from her. And she's an amazing chef, and she makes a dish that I love. You can have it for breakfast, you can have it as a dessert. It's called khanfaroush, and it's like a little pancake, but it's not a pancake. It's thicker than a pancake, and it has saffron and cardamom. And for me, this is the best cardamom. This is the best comfort food, because there's something, I don't know, there's something for me healing when I have anything with cardamom and saffron as well. So my kids love that dish, and my children love it so much, and she lives part of the year in Paris. So whenever we'd go to her, she would fill a tin bowl with khanfaroush and give it to us, and it lasts for days. I would say that, and maybe soup. I love soups, and I love cooking soups.
Okay, we have to do episode 2. I think this is part 1, because there's so much more to talk about.
No, thank you so much. Thank you.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruthie's Table 4 was produced by Alex Bell, Robbie Hamilton, and Zad Rogers, with Andrew Sang and Bella Salini. This has been an Atomized production for iHeart Media.